What's up, fight fans? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast for another edition of the UFC pay-per-view post-fight show. This time, UFC 261, one day removed from a night that only mixed martial arts could offer in terms of the emotional ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys. UFC 261. Wow, I can't remember an event in recent memory or even in my UFC fandom that offered the emotional roller coaster that UFC 261 offered the UFC fans, I should say, last night, MMA fans last night. What an event it was. I can't wait to dive into it. I can't wait to recap each and every moment of that main card, UFC 261. What an event. I am still speechless over what took place. If you were to draw it up any which way, I don't think you could have drawn it up this way. I don't think anyone had those three title fights going down in the fashion that they did, with Kamaru Usman winning via TKO over Jorge Masvidal, with the co-main event, Thug Rose Namajunas reclaiming her title over Weili Zhang, or Zhang Weili, or having the fact that Chris Weidman to start the card with, essentially the first real big fight on the card, the injury. And I have to start from the beginning here, of course, with the fact that anytime you have a pay-per-view like this with three title fights on it, the other fights, the first two fights on the card, they get lost in translation a little bit. And for the UFC 261 post-fight reaction show, I have to talk about all the fights. I have to with this card, because Anthony Lionheart Smith, to start off the show, he deserves a lot of credit for the performance that he turned out against Jimmy Crute. Jimmy Crute is going to be around a long time. He's a young fighter. He's had a solid record professionally. He's done a lot of decent things with some clutch wins here, in his last few fights against decent competition. And this was a possible, future contender. And Anthony Lionheart Smith gets another win, this time against Jimmy Crute, and it was a win that was a little bit gross in terms of how Anthony Lionheart Smith threw those leg kicks, and one leg kick in particular just turned the nerves completely off in that leg of Jimmy Crute. Jimmy didn't have much to really offer in the bout after that, and Anthony Lionheart Smith was able to take home a technical knockout victory, being that the ref decided to stop the action. And Anthony Lionheart Smith, I think he's actually getting better, which is a scary statement to make because he's one of the more veteran guys in the game today, in the sport today, in the fight game in general. The amount of fights that Anthony Lionheart Smith has had, over 50 professional fights, and that win really puts him right back into the thick of things in terms of one step closer, I guess I could say, in terms of being right there in the thick of things for a title contention, conversation. He is right back in the mix there with a solid win over Jimmy Crute. I really like Anthony Lionheart Smith. He represents himself extremely well, and he's got a budding analyst career as well beyond the fight game. I like the coverage that he provides for the sport. So Anthony Lionheart Smith back in the win column. We start off there. Congratulations to him. But, man, this one really hurt. I've never felt so just heavy after watching a fighter the way that Chris Weidman did last. That was brutal. That was probably one of the most brutal videos I've ever seen in terms of videos, I should say fight moments that I've ever seen in terms of Chris Weidman. Just devastating to see a guy like that get injured in that way. And by a guy like that, I mean, there are few guys in this sport that are as down to earth as Chris Weidman. And to see that happen to him was very tough for me to see. I'm a big Chris Weidman fan, and I don't know what the road, what the future holds, what pathway will this injury lead to for Chris Weidman. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this is the beginning of the end for Chris Weidman. I'm going to root for him to come back and make that comeback. But I just don't know. I mean, that was a vicious, disgusting, horrifying injury. Probably the worst leg break I've ever seen in a fight. And for it to happen, let alone 17 seconds into the bout, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, let alone a guy as great as Chris Weidman, someone that I've actually had the honor of meeting in person, and just a true gentleman. To give you guys a little bit of a backstory, I was obviously really pumped up about 4 years ago when the UFC decided to come to Buffalo, and Chris Weidman fought on that card against Gegard Mousasi, and he had that weird, loss, I guess you could say. It was a weird kind of conundrum in his fight with Mousasi, where Mousasi threw a knee at a technically downed opponent with Weidman's 4 fingers down on the mat. They considered that at the time a downed opponent. I believe they still do. I don't know the rule book of the New York State Athletic Commission as well as someone that should know it. Ref or whatever, fighter, or whoever. But just to know the highest of highs, in terms of the highest of highs that Chris Weidman experienced in his career, beating Anderson Silva not once, but then beating him the second time around in the fashion that he did, firing off his own leg kick on Anderson Silva that Anderson blocked, and that Anderson, Anderson fires the check kick there, the low leg kick. Chris Weidman checks it, defends it, and Anderson shatters his leg. Then 8 years later, Chris fires his own leg kick on Uriah Hall and shatters his leg. The irony in that is just, the fight game is just so unfair. It is so unfair. The fight gods are so cruel. And I'm really hoping that Chris Weidman, can make a comeback and make his impact, in the fight game again. But I just don't know, at 36 years old, to say, let's just speculate whether this is the end or not. I don't want to think that it is, to be honest. I don't want to count the chickens before they hatch. I want to give Chris Weidman the opportunity to decide whether he's actually going to come back or not. It's only been less than a day since this happened. This happened late last night. But let's just hypothetically, for the sake of the show, let's just say that Chris Weidman is leaning towards the decision of being done. He had his shining moment. He had that night, that one night that Uriah Faber never had, that Chael Sonnen never had, that one night where you're on top of the world, where you're the talk of the MMA world. And I mean, not many fighters get that night. And that's the night that every fighter kind of searches for. Chris Weidman had that night when he knocked out Anderson Silva. That alone was legendary. That alone puts him in the conversation of the history book, so to speak, within MMA. If you were to put out a textbook and hand it to the class, Chris Weidman is a part of that textbook, no doubt about it. So, I'm looking forward to seeing, what happens from him from here on out, because I understand that he did have his surgery this morning and that he is in good spirits, and he's, in recovery, obviously, from this horrific injury. But, man, it just couldn't have happened to a better guy. And I hate saying it like that, but Chris Weidman is one of the best guys in this sport in terms of just a really thoughtful human being. I went to UFC 210. I was there for the open workouts, which were on a Thursday, and then the weigh-ins were on a Friday. I attended the weigh-ins as well. The open workouts, I was really close to the fighters. I got to meet Daniel Cormier. I got to meet Chris Weidman. I got to meet Anthony Johnson, Gegard Mousasi, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, John Vellante, Chris Weidman, to name a few. Charles Oliveira, who's fighting for the title in a couple weeks, lightweight title. And Chris Weidman was the nicest guy out of all of them, outside of Wonderboy. And there's just no way anyone could be nicer than Wonderboy. But outside of Wonderboy, Chris Weidman was extremely nice. And family guy, it was just gut-wrenching. I'm really hoping that he can make his comeback and let his presence be known in the fight game once again. But we'll see what happens. It was a brutal injury. And Uriah Hall, shout out to him. He checks that leg kick, and he just looked gutted. He just looked devastated. He looked like, what have I done? And he looked just very, very depressed after that fight. And I felt so bad for him as well. Just a terrible situation all around. But, the way Uriah Hall handled it showed to me how much he's matured from his Ultimate Fighter days. There's a guy that, a lot of the competitors within that house thought that Uriah Hall was a cocky guy and an arrogant guy. And Uriah Hall handled that just just with such class and grace that you would love to see from a true professional. And that's what Uriah Hall showed, in the aftermath of Chris Weidman's leg injury. So, all right, so we're moving on. We're moving on to the bullet with a name. The bullet with a name is Valentina Shevchenko. The bullet does it again. This, among all the impressive performances that the rest of the night had to offer, in terms of how I envisioned Valentina Shevchenko winning this fight with Jessica Andrade, I did not imagine Valentina Shevchenko out-muscling, out-wrestling, out-maneuvering Jessica Andrade. She ragdolled Jessica Andrade. She looked like Khabib Nurmagomedov out there. The bullet was fun to watch last night in terms of her dominance, putting Jessica Andrade in that crucifix-type position, and Andrade was just weathering the storm of those elbows. If that fight would have lasted any longer, not only would Jessica Andrade's face look like Hamburger Hill, it would have looked like, spaghetti sauce was all over her face. It would have got really ugly. Her face was opening up. Valentina was landing those short elbows, and that's all she wrote. The question is, with the dominance that Valentina has shown at 125 pounds, who is next for Valentina Shevchenko? They're throwing out names like Lauren Murphy. They're throwing out names within that flyweight division. And with all due respect, I just don't know if strawweight division. I just don't know, to correct myself, the strawweight division. I just don't know if Valentina has any challengers there. I just don't see anyone that is painfully obvious to me that oh wow, that girl, she'll give Valentina a challenge. I just don't see that. That's just not what I see. But we'll see what happens, right? We'll see what happens. The UFC is a big money machine. They move forward. It's always about what's next. They'll book her a fight pretty soon, I think, and she'll be competing shortly against someone. But the thought of Valentina versus Amanda Nunes is definitely on my mind. And I'd love to see that fight happen. Whether it happens sooner rather than later remains to be seen. But I think the talk for that fight, that trilogy match, should begin. It's tough to sell, being that Amanda Nunes beat Valentina twice. But the second fight, I thought Valentina Shevchenko was actually robbed. I thought Valentina Shevchenko actually won that fight. So I'd like to see the third one happen at some point. Whether it does or not remains to be seen. This fight here, this next fight here on the card, the co-main event, Weili versus Rose. What an amazing moment in this sport to witness Rose Namajunas capture the title, not once, but twice, in devastating fashion. The way she did it the first time, knocking out Joanna Jędrzejczyk, was a picture-perfect moment in UFC 217's 3 title fights card. Back when George fought Bisping, back when Cody Garbrandt first tried to defend his title against TJ Dillashaw. All 3 challengers won those titles on that night. Rose was one of them. She lost the title in May of 2019 to Jessica Andrade, held the title for a little while, lost it to Andrade eventually in May of 2019, then gets her shot to get it back last night, April 24th, against Weili, who is an amazing competitor, an amazing champion in her own right, and offered a lot of unique challenges to Rose. But Rose is on another level. Comparing, I guess I could say, comparing Rose now to when she was first wrapped in UFC gold, she's a much better fighter than what she was. And I think her self-belief is huge. We've seen the videos of her already saying, I'm the best, I'm the best. The belief that she has in herself is really what has been missing in her game, in her career. She needs to have that self-belief in order to compete at the highest of levels. And that is a situation where you see someone win a title like that with that devastating head kick knockout, and you say that's couldn't have happened to a better person. I mean, she's just such a humble professional figure in the sport of mixed martial arts, and she represents herself extremely well. And what's for her? What's out there for her? I mean, she's fought Weili. She's fought Joanna. She beat Joanna twice. I don't know who's out there for Rose to fight. There's rumblings of a rematch already with Weili, but I think that's a tough sell, being that Rose just knocked her out. A very tough sell, but we'll see what happens. That really took me by surprise in terms of how, not just how fluid she looks. She always looks fluid, but the setup to that head kick was amazing. She fakes the leg kick, puts it up top to the head, and Weili didn't even see it coming. Thug Rose reigns supreme once again. A really great moment for mixed martial arts, a really great moment for Rose and her career to get the belt back. A lot of trials and tribulations personally for her throughout her life, and to see her back on top, that's a situation as well that couldn't happen for the better to a better person. That's how I look at the fact that Thug Rose reclaimed her title, and I'm really happy for her. I think that she's a great fighter, a great competitor, and to see her get her belt back, and honestly, and seeing her in the cage, man, seeing her in the cage, just bawling her eyes out. Okay, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I started getting a little misty. I'm getting misty now talking about it. The fact that she was just so over the moon about having that belt wrapped around her the belt wrapped around her waist, I should say, was something that really I found it really heartwarming and special, unique. And those are things that Rose represents. She's special, she's unique, and I'm very, very, very happy for her. She's one of the best female fighters of all time. So with that being said, Ryan Thomas here on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast as we dive into the main event, Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal Part 2. This was a big welterweight title fight, to say the least, and there was some bad blood between Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal, but that bad blood ended last night with a defining result, and that was Kamaru Usman retaining his title with a vicious, devastating right hand knockout against Jorge Masvidal in the second round. Jorge said in the lead up to this fight that Kamaru Usman had pillow hands, that he didn't hit hard, that he put him in no fear, put him in a no fear zone, and Kamaru Usman doesn't have the power and striking acumen to finish Jorge. Jorge's never been finished like that up until last night in any fight. He's heading into his 50th professional fight. Kamaru Usman adjusts, fires that right hand, fakes the left hand, fires the right, and knocks out Jorge Masvidal. Now, there's the discussion as to whether or not Kamaru Usman is the greatest welterweight of all time. I don't think he is yet. He is certainly making his case. I don't know if anyone will ever be considered the greatest welterweight of all time, for me personally, over George St. Pierre, but there's no doubt about it. There's definitely a case that Kamaru Usman is inching closer to that discussion due to the winning that he has done. That's all he has done since he's been in the UFC is win. So, if he continues that, of course, but Kamaru Usman knocking out Jorge Masvidal showed me that this guy is nowhere near his potential yet. He is continuously getting better while defending the title, and that's a rare thing to see. That's what we see from legends in the sport, like GSP, like Silva, Anderson Silva, and some of the other fighters, John Jones, along the way. They're able to adapt their skill set to fit any fight. To knock out Jorge Masvidal, to knock out Gilbert Burns, to outwill Colby Covington. Those are big talking points when referring to Kamaru Usman and the career that he has had. He's had a phenomenal career in the UFC. And it's obvious the fight that we're going to see probably for him next is a rematch with Colby Covington. Colby deserves it. Kamaru deserves the payday. Colby does represent a draw in terms of Usman and Covington sharing an event, sharing the billing. I think that fight does sell. The first one was very, very good. The first fight with Usman and Colby Covington, in all fairness, was better than the fight between Usman and Jorge Masvidal the first time. Second time, being that we got that definitive finish, Kamaru Usman showed he is the real deal. He is a steal in terms of a fighter that came out of nowhere, essentially. Did he have a standout wrestling career? Yes, but he was put in that Ultimate Fighter house. You didn't know who was really going to win that season. Obviously, there weren't clear-cut favorites. Kamaru just burst onto the scene in that show. Now he's bursting onto the scene of being talked about as one of the all-time greats. Kamaru Usman is a special fighter and a special man that represents himself very well as a champion in this sport. Now, the big question is, what the heck is going to happen with Jorge Masvidal? Are there fights out there left for him? Obviously, the title shot days, the title contending days for Jorge Masvidal are over as long as Kamaru Usman is the champ. So now Jorge Masvidal has to become the biggest Colby Covington fan once again and root for Colby Covington to beat Usman so that Masvidal can get a title shot if he rattles off a win or two. I think Jorge Masvidal's got to get back in the line of things. And fight a few fights, fight a couple fights, maybe one or two, depending on the first performance. In the first performance, he knocks out his next opponent, then, you're obviously talking about Masvidal being in title contention again. That is if and only if Kamaru Usman is no longer the champ. And to be quite honest with you, I don't see Kamaru Usman losing anytime soon. It was a great event. UFC 261 offered a ton of amazing moments for fight fans. I couldn't wait to hop on here and recap the event. Hopefully you enjoyed my recap. UFC 261, Usman retains his title versus Masvidal. Thug Rose reigns supreme once again, knocking out Weili Zhang. The bullet, Valentina Shevchenko, is the bullet with a name. You should know her. You should respect her. Valentina Shevchenko. She's one of the greatest female mixed martial artists of all time. Get well soon, Chris Weidman. Get well soon, please. I don't want to see your career end like that, but I would rather see your career end like that than see you get hurt worse in another form or fashion. I love you, Chris Weidman. I think you're a great fighter. Your career has been amazing. You deserve a lot of credit for what you've been able to accomplish and endure. But to me, you don't have anything to prove. But obviously, a fighter's heart is the everlasting flame. So we'll see what happens. Everlasting eternal flame. That is the heart of Chris Weidman, man. Oh, man, that was such a tough injury to see. But nonetheless, I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, UFC 261 post-fight reaction show. Thank you so much for tuning in. For more episodes of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, you can tune in on Facebook, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, as well as Spotify for the audio listeners out there. Take care. Stay safe. Enjoy this beautiful spring that we're about to have. In case I don't see you soon, I'll be seeing you within the next couple days. No doubt about it. You know that I'm going to be on soon. 2021 NFL Draft is happening. I pulled a fast one on you guys. You guys know that I'll be out there doing my thing on some shows these next few days, and obviously back on here behind the mics. The Thomas Take Sports Podcast is thriving, doing extremely well. I appreciate all the support, and I look forward to providing you guys with essential draft coverage in the coming days. Take care, everybody, and go Bills.